Hello everybody, welcome back to the Rugby Bunker. For this YouTube episode, I am delighted to be joined by Harry Latham-Coyle of The Independent. Hello Harry, how are you?
Hi Ben, glad I've made my way down to the Rugby Bunker and safely made it. I mean, it was quite the odyssey getting down here, but good to be here.
People always get here, but do they ever fully escape and make it back? That is the question. Yes, is the answer, in case anybody is worried where Rob Kitson is after his appearance last week. No, Harry, delighted to have you on. I'm slightly, I don't know what to do with myself though. You don't have a book or a play to promote or plug on this episode. So yeah, far away. Tell us something about yourself instead.
Yeah, I feel very left out after Tim with his excellent book and Rob, whose play opened, I hear, to rave reviews last week. Sadly, I couldn't make it down to see it, but yeah, I must do something with my life. I think be slightly more productive.
Well, I'm not saying that's the reason that I got you on here, but if it helps incentivize you and to make you think ahead, then fantastic. Now, look, Harry, we were chatting before recording, and you weren't actually at a Premiership game last weekend, but you were on are we calling it a busman's holiday on Friday night? Whereabouts were you?
I think a busman's holiday would be about correct. Yeah, I had a rare weekend off, PREM action, and so thought what better to do with myself than go down to Richmond on Friday night for London Scottish versus Nottingham in the rebranded Champ Rugby. A little while since I've been to a Champ game, and found it a very pleasant experience, actually. Yeah, a pint on the terraces was very welcome. You lose touch sometimes, I guess, with what it's like to go to games as a fan, and yeah, it was very pleasant. A really good win for Nottingham on the road, and very impressive performance. Scored basically from the opening kickoff and never really let up from there. So very much enjoyed that.
How much are we talking for the pint on the terrace? How much did it cost you?
I will confess to not maybe having bought my own pints. So thank you very much to Elgin Alden of the Times, and actually I think Charles Richardson, your ex-colleague at the Telegraph, also put his hand in his pocket, and yeah, so I'm not sure, but I would imagine £6.50. That's about the going rate, isn't it? For
goodness me, I mean, I think I'd take that. I mean, well, listen, I mean, just man of the people was the first thing that came to my head when you were like, it's good to get back in touch with the grassroots of the game and with the Champ. Yeah, listen, I'm yet to watch a Champ TV broadcast, and I must admit that I've forgotten the platform that's showing it. But yeah, I'm very intrigued how that is going to play out this season. Clubber TV, that's it. I found it. It's showing all the Champ Rugby games this season. Well, let's dive into the latest PREM Rugby weekend, which was full of fascinating games, as someone suggested when I tweeted out the latest column that I've done on the Off-Field Review Substack this morning, and they just said, actually, I watched a lot of the games in France, a lot of the games in the PREM this weekend, and all of the PREM games were belters. If we dive straight in there, I want to chat a little bit about starting with Bath against Gloucester. Bath being top of the table with 3 bonus point wins. I feel two ways about this. It's both expected, which is good, because it's nice to occasionally get our kind of predictions and our hunches correct, isn't it? Because it doesn't always happen. But also, it's incredibly ominous for the rest of the league and for the rest of the season, because I'm sure there's going to be patches where Bath lose a bit of steam and a bit of momentum. But right now, having ridden out that passage without Finn Russell, and now you get Finn Russell back kind of dominating a game. I mean, Gloucester put Bath under pressure for a period, but Bath are just so complete as a side, aren't they, that actually it's very hard to kind of wonder where they're going to slip up and when they're going to be beaten this season.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And Bath haven't had it easy in these first 3 weeks. You're right. They have Max Ajomo, who's basically a centre, playing 10 the first couple. Finn Russell comes back this week, and Ben Spencer's out injured. They lost 3 lock options basically last week to injury with Quinn Roux, Charlie Ewells and Ted Hill. But you just see that depth come through. Someone like Ewan Richards, who's more of a fringe figure, had a really good Prem Rugby Cup campaign last year, but gets his opportunity, shines. Russell slots straight back in, looks really comfortable. Santi Carreras comes off the bench, immediately seems to slot in. They're just a really, really, really impressive, well-coached, incredibly deep side. And yeah, it is looking ominous. It is very hard to see past them defending the title, which would be great news for that club. You wait 29 years for a Prem title and then go back to back. But there's a lot of water to go under the bridge and a lot of rugby to be played between now and the final. So we'll see.
Is that a Bath pun there? Because with water under the bridge. Because if it is, I love it. I'm all for it, given their location. I think that's very good.
Not intentional, but the Pulteney Bridge is a highlight of match going days in the Prem. So we'll take it.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. I'm glad you mentioned Ewan Richards because, like you say, sort of had kind of like higher profile flashes in this game. But you're right, they're going to be tested there a lot without. We're not sure yet quite how long Quinn and Charlie Ewells and those guys are going to be out for. But that is an area where their depth is already tested. Ted Hill as well, who can quite handily cover a lock, which is something that England have kind of looked at, isn't it? Adding Santi Carreras is just a real kind of flex to be able to add a quality player like that on top of Henry Arundell. And the way Arundell has started the season has just been unbelievable. His pace in this game against Gloucester to catch up to an Ollie Lawrence kick, which Lawrence probably presumed is going to be a 50-22. And then the way that Arundell was able to actually beat the ball to the touchline, somehow keep it in to set up Tonda Glanville's opener. I think everybody knows that Arundell is a crazy finisher with raw speed, but you've seen him contribute in areas where he's setting up tries as well. And generally, he just looks kind of a better player. I mean, I don't want to say it's too early to talk England squads and England involvement, but because actually, before we know it, we're going to be sat down for that opening game at Allianz Stadium, aren't we? But do you think we've seen enough from Arundell so far that, maybe there's a chance that he's back involved immediately?
I think there is a very real possibility of that. I think we're expecting a training squad to be named next weekend, and then a full England squad maybe the weekend after that final round of Prem fixtures before the Quarter Nations series begins. Arundell's, we know he's got elite athleticism, and we've seen that, and that's fitted in really nicely to where Bath have been at. They've had distributors like Ajomo getting the ball wide, putting him in space, but he's really taken his opportunities. I think he made 5 offloads or something like that against Gloucester, and he's clearly got the license to play a little bit. He's bringing others in really well. He's been really good as a kick chaser as well, which is, I know, something that Johan van Graan is very big on his wings. Joe Kokonasiga's done a lot of work on that. Will Muir is always very good in the air. So it's not just the flashy stuff with Arundell, but that is the stuff that catches the eye. And there aren't many athletes like him in the English game. Whether that will be enough to force his way into Steve Borthwick's squads, I'm not sure. Wing is an area of strength, I think, now for England. Traditionally, Borthwick has looked for a bigger wing, someone like a Freeman and a Roebuck or a Will Muir, and then a slightly smaller roaming wing like a Faye Boso or an Ollie Slightholme. Arundell would seem to fit more into that latter category. So we'll see. It's a really fascinating selection shake-up, I think. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if Arundell is at the very least in the wider squad.
Yeah, because Tom Roebuck was on my list of players who stood out. The Sale thrashing of Newcastle was disappointing, to say the least, from a competitive sense, because I think we know that this is going to be a long road for Newcastle. The decision to get rid of Steve Diamond, Charlie and I have discussed this, and it's come up a couple of other times as well on the YouTube show. That's going to set Newcastle back a few weeks and maybe a couple of months in terms of on the pitch. I can see why Red Bull, if they didn't feel that Steve was the person they wanted off the pitch to bring in all these new players, I get why they did that. But I think the on-field product is probably suffering at the moment, because actually the team out at Sale on Friday wasn't miles off what the best that Newcastle kind of have to offer this season. So that's a concern. But Roebuck looked great. I mean he's impressive in the air. He cuts in brilliantly for his first try, and he's got this real burst of speed. He does have more size than an Arundell. But then someone like Ollie Hassel-Collins, who I know is start the season well, and people are starting to say, well, is it time that Steve Borthwick has another look at him? You've got him as well. You've got Tommy Freeman, although is Tommy Freeman going to be a centre? There's lots of just little questions about England's kind of back 3 options, aren't there? Which makes it fun for us, because it gives us plenty to write about and to talk about on shows like this. But yeah, it almost feels like there's still a few questions to be answered.
Yeah, the way that backline shapes up is probably the key point this autumn, I think. And it may depend on who they go with at fly half. I think we might get onto that a little bit later. But there are so many versatile pieces now, whether you look at Freeman as a guy who can play at 13, whether Ollie Lawrence is back in the mix, whether that's at 12 or 13. It was a shame to see Seb Atkinson go off injured in that Bath game. But Roebuck is a guy I've liked for a very long time, and really feels like he's now coming of age as a wing, and probably deserves another opportunity. He went well in the summer. He went well in that game against Wales at the end of the Six Nations. So yeah, we'll see. But Yeah, options are plenty for Steve Borthwick, which is probably a good place to be in.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, I think he must be very happy, and especially because that Argentina tour in the summer went so well from a result standpoint and momentum standpoint. I know there was the USA game was thrown in there as well, but I mean, I think certainly the way England are trending in those sort of areas, Steve's got to be fairly happy. I'm just thinking before we chat a bit about Northampton's winning over Leicester, minutes before we started recording this, Northampton announced that Alex Mitchell has signed a new multi-year contract. Alex Mitchell's sneaky old at 28. I think in my head he's like 20, still 23, 24, which is a credit to his youthful appearance. But yeah, he's about to clock up 150 appearances for Saints, which is fairly remarkable. Made his debut back in 2017. I think Northampton getting him and Finn Smith back, and I know Tommy Freeman went off with a knock in the win over Leicester, but having Mitchell and Smith and Pollock back as well after their Lions duties, the fact that they actually came out of the opening 2 rounds with that crazy draw at Exeter and then arguably an even crazier win over Gloucester at Kingsholm, where they just absolutely hate having a big lead. The Leicester game was a bit different, but they had Mitchell and Smith back to run the show, and that must be quite nice, I imagine.
Yeah, I suspect you'll be getting an angry letter from Alex Mitchell for calling him old at 28. But, it's...
I'm staggered.
I think part of the problem is that we so often group him with guys like Finn Smith, guys like Tommy Freeman, who are that little bit younger. And it does feel like, because it sort of took Mitchell a little bit of time to establish himself in the England side, maybe we just think of him as that little bit younger. But no, that's a really good bit of business from Northampton to tie up both him and Finn Smith on a long-term basis. We wondered how this contracting cycle would shake out. It happens a lot with clubs where they have, I don't know, a golden generation or a group of 4 or 5 guys emerge at the same time. And it can be tricky to get their contracts sorted, particularly if they're off contract at the same time. But to tie down your halfbacks for the foreseeable future is really positive. And we saw their value at the weekend. I mean, obviously, an East Midlands derby brings with it a unique pressure. And I thought they just controlled the game really nicely. Northampton had to deal with some backline chaos. They had a few shifting parts, but Finn Smith, as he always does, imparted structure, imparted shape really nicely. I know you wrote about Edoardo Todaro this morning in your Substack, and he looks a real find on the wing as well. But yeah, I think they're in a good spot. You're right; they've come through a couple of chaotic games, and they're still unbeaten this season. So they'll be right in the mix. And yeah, happy to see Mitchell staying at Cinch Stadiums at Franklin's Gardens long term.
Oh, look at that perfect kind of stadium name work. I mean, that is sensational. Yeah, Todaro fascinates me because I thought this morning after I wrote that yesterday, and chatted to a couple of people sort of around Northampton about him. If he is going to be in Gonzalo Quesada's Italy squad for the autumn, which according to reports in Italy last night I was reading, sounds like it's going to happen, then that's another international back that Northampton will be losing for an extended period of time, which is obviously what they probably would not have expected at the start of the season, that their young Italian would be away for lengthy periods. Like talking about Arundell earlier, it's not just the tries. Like the tries are great. It's the way that there's a clip from before the Tom Pearson try, which he helped set up, where you're sort of watching him, watching Finn Smith, watching Alex Mitchell, sort of almost in a line the phase beforehand, and they're just kind of, he's just looking to go off Smith's body movement, to go off Mitchell's body movement. And the way he seemed very comfortable there, the way he settled in, has good power, has good speed, just another exciting back in Northampton's backline. I mean, it's insane, the kind of depth and resource they have there. And Alex Mitchell's contract, to go back to that, says it's a multi-year deal, which is interesting again from an R360 perspective. I think the regular viewers will know that Charlie and I spoke about that on Friday, and how that statement from the unions last week saying that R360 players would be ineligible for Test rugby, and how potentially kind of damaging that is going to be. I'm really interested to see how many more kind of deals come out in the next few weeks and what that means for the outlook of R360. One player, though, Harry, whose future is less clear at the moment, is Tom Willis at Saracens, who had another good game in their defeat at Harlequins on Sunday. Maybe just slightly off the pace from his performances in the first 2 weeks, but he was still really, really impressive. Lots of hard carries. Was maybe kind of outshone on the day in that regard by Charlie Cunningham himself, which is no shame, because Cunningham himself's an excellent player. But I wrote in the Observer on Sunday with Willis that Leon and Bayonne are both interested in his services, which is what I've heard from a couple of parties. I know there's also interest in Japan. There's also interest from R360. Mark McCall said after the game that Saracens have made an offer's on the table for Willis. One caveat would be that Willis this season is on one of those enhanced DPS contracts, isn't he, which gets him a kind of extra 160,000 guaranteed per season and all the medical perks that come with it. I just wonder if we can just play out a hypothetical scenario here. If we get to the end of the autumn and Tom Willis hasn't started all 4 tests for England at number 8, what do you reckon he does? What do you reckon his next move is?
It's a fascinating question, and you're right. We will probably learn a lot more about Tom Willis's situation over this next 6 weeks or so, regardless of whether he signs a contract or not. The handing of an enhanced DPS to him, I think, was a bit of a statement from Steve Borthwick saying, "You're one of my long-term guys. You know, we know the competition in the back row, particularly for England, is incredibly fierce. But Willis offers something that nobody else really does with his capacity as a carrier, both, you know, to make meters, particularly in the tight. England just don't really have many guys with that sort of skill set. So my suspicion is he'll have a pretty big role to play this autumn. And my suspicion then is that he'll re-sign with Saracens. We don't see that many players move on from Saracens, certainly when they're in their prime. It's been a club that has built an identity, I guess, around retaining players. If you think back over the years, we really haven't seen that many guys move on from there. The fact that an offer is on the table, I guess, is suggests we may reach a conclusion sooner than we might think. Yeah, well, I'm assuming Willis will play a big role this autumn, and I'm assuming he'll re-sign with Saracens. But it's no surprise there's interested parties. I mean, even on Sunday, when I didn't feel like he had his most impactful game, but you know, still stats wise, still with his importance as a carrier to Saracens, that was perfectly clear in a tough day for them. Yeah, he's still a young guy. He's still got room to grow. So yeah, fascinated to see how that plays out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I chatted with the source at Saracens last week who spoke about how they've kind of Willis kind of came in and said they discussed which areas they wanted him to work on this season and how they basically changed his whole catching technique in terms of how he actually handles the ball. Before he wasn't necessarily the most confident kind of person with his hands, and so he would always try and catch the ball in his chest. And now you can actually see him when he plays. It's a lot more like out in front of him in terms of flinging offloads and trying to kind of free his arms up more. I think if they can add that layer to his game, which actually then essentially turns him into Billy Vunipola, doesn't it? Because Billy Vunipola had the crazy ball carrying and the turnover ability that Willis has, but could also fling off offloads and ruin defences by keeping the play alive. I think if he can develop in that area as well. He's 26 years old, I want to say, so he's like entering the prime of his career. This next contract for him is enormous, and I'm sure that Saracens will have budgeted for that as well. But I don't know, if it doesn't work out in the autumn, if England decide that they want to stick with Ben Earl as their number 8, which I'm not necessarily sure they will, and if Willis is left in this bench role where maybe he feels he's not contributing, it would be a surprise, firstly, because he did start, I think he started like 5 out of the 8 tests this year that England have played, and one of those was the USA, so you can kind of almost disregard that from the equation. It would be a shock if he wasn't in that prominent role, but at the same time, he faces a massive decision, and these are the things that he has to weigh up. And so I'm fascinated to see how he plays out. Anything else that you sort of have in mind about Willis and where he goes?
No, I think you're right. There is room for growth there. I mean, he's not. I mean, Billy Vunipola was almost one of one with his ability as a distributor, and you know, you think of some of those guys in that Saracens pack at that time, Mako Vunipola, Vincent Koch. That is still missing, I think, from this Saracen side, and that was shown up a little bit with the way Harlequins defended on Sunday. But no, I think we're in agreement in terms of Willis's role this autumn. I'd be very surprised if he's not at number. Yeah, the Australia game's funny because I think that'll be a high run meters game, so they might go for the more mobile back row that we've seen at times in the Ireland game, for example. But no, I just think their back row looks better balanced with Willis in it, and we'll see though.
We will indeed. Listen, Harry, let's have a little break, and then we're going to get into the nice, straightforward topic of who should start at fly half for England during the autumn. Right, Harry, we're back. Let's have a little chat about what England are going to do at Fly Half in the autumn. And the only reason we're doing that is because we had both Finn Smith and Marcus Smith back in action last weekend for the first time since the British and Irish Lions tour. Marcus Smith was particularly excellent for Harlequins in their win over Saracens, not just because of the usual kind of bits of magic that we're used to seeing from him, but just his general kind of control of the kicking game and the way that Harlequins implemented that tactic of pinning Saracens well, and just their general approach, which maybe Saracens weren't quite expecting. I think Mark McCall put his hands up afterwards and said, look, we weren't quite prepared for what they had for us. It was impressive to see Marcus Smith play that way, wasn't it? And it just shows that actually you can get boxed in as a flair player, and it can be very hard to then break out of that box. But actually this was the kind of, all-round performance that will have impressed people, hopefully.
Yeah, I think he's been a better game manager than people have sometimes suggested over the years. He's not just an all-flash and no trousers player. We have seen this in an England shirt, but particularly in a Harlequins shirt. There was a game at Welford Road a couple of years ago I remember covering where, again, he produced a performance a bit like this, really, really, really well controlled, really measured, kicks really well. But I was super impressed by Harlequins on Sunday. They came with a very clear game plan. They wanted to get after Saracens' backfield. They identified some areas of weakness. It was an inexperienced wing pairing, particularly after Lucio Cinti moved into midfield, and Harlequins targeted that. They targeted Fergus Burke in the backfield. They targeted Owen Farrell in the backfield when he was there. You heard Marcus Smith a couple of times sort of almost call out Owen Farrell's name as he put a kick up on his head. And I think it was 18 kicks in play from Marcus Smith, more than 550 kick meters, 6 of those retained. That's impressive. They dominated that kick battle, and it does show that kicking doesn't have to be a negative thing, and it can be used in a really proactive and offensive way. And with someone like Smith, who thrives in those unstructured situations, the uncertainty of kick contests now, particularly since the escorting law, means you can almost create unstructured situations out of the structure of a kick. And the other thing to say is I think Harlequins would have felt they could have got at Saracens' scrum, which isn't maybe the force that it once was. So if you send up more of those 50-50 high balls, if you get into more of those scrummaging situations, it was a really good scrum battle, but there wouldn't have been any fear factor there for Harlequins. So it was a really smart, well-executed game plan, and no wonder it paid off with a Derby Day victory.
For sure. And it requires, this is stating the obvious, it requires kind of discipline and kind of real kind of focus to stick to that and not kind of waver off it. And that's not me saying that Marcus Smith doesn't have that in his locker, but I think the control that the Harlequins just showed as a collective to execute on that will maybe change opinions about them slightly, especially having gone to Matty Hollywood's Welford Road the week before and had that big lead and then kind of succumbed and fallen apart there to Leicester's comeback. I think actually this it changes the perspective around Harlequins. They had made an insane number of tackles coming into this weekend, something like up in the 450s, 460s through 2 rounds, which was unsustainable. But they managed to, through this kicking game, kind of nullify Saracens and to have a bit more control. And also in the second half, as the sun was progressively getting lower, much harder to sort of make those catches, isn't it? And so if you're sending kicks at the right height, then it's very hard for even a player like Max Malins, who's obviously got so much experience. Like guys like that were struggling in the conditions. Yeah, I came away feeling very impressed by how Marcus dealt with that and how Harlequins dealt with that. And it might just change some people's thinking around him for the autumn. I think having said that, if it was coming down to one of the three of them right now, George Ford was able to have a bit of a quieter night against Newcastle, which is good because every Sale win cannot just be built around what George Ford does. They need other people to step up, and they took advantage of the opposition, no doubt about that. But at the same time, Ford started the season brilliantly in the win over Gloucester and the defeat against Bath. Can you select Ford, Harry, and still be building towards the future? Or should you be starting Smith and having Ford in the environment as like player coach, which it sort of feels like he's been doing for the last few years anyway? And just finally, before I let you answer that, it's also worth noting that Ford is on an enhanced DPS contract, so he's not viewed as like some kind of bit part player. He is seen as one of the core group, getting one of those top up deals that are worth 160,000.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I think actually Steve Borthwick has managed it really well, putting all three of them on enhanced EPS contracts last year, renewing all of them this year. He's not shown his hand, and he's almost mixed and matched a little bit in the last 12 months, particularly. You know, this time last year, we were coming up to an autumn where Marcus Smith had probably some of his best performances in an England shirt. You move on to the Six Nations. Finn Smith looks like he's really seized that shirt. You go down to Argentina, and George Ford provides a reminder of his enduring class. I think we know from speaking to people in the game, speaking to people in the England environment, just how valuable Ford is off the field. But he seems so incredibly content and comfortable in his game on the field as well now. He's not forcing things. He's got that really lovely balance between playing and game managing and kicking and passing and bringing others into the game. I think if you wanted to win a test right now, George Ford would probably be your man, which feels a bold thing to say with how well Finn Smith did finish the Six Nations earlier in the year. I could see Ford making the next World Cup. It's not, I don't think it's as simple as saying build for the future or play for the now, because I think the future could end up being George Ford still. The versatility that Marcus Smith offers 10-15 is another layer of complexity within that. Yeah, it's again, it's an area of real strength for England, which is good, but potentially poses a real headache just because they all seem to be in really good form, which, yeah, is a pleasant place to be.
I mean, yeah, there are nice headaches, aren't they? And this is obviously one of them. I think it was Charlie joked on the last show that we did that, yeah, you could just have all three in your 23, and England did that in the big win against Wales when they had Marcus Smith at fullback and Ford on the bench. I'm not sure that works for every kind of scenario or opponent that England are in, but it's possible. I think there's a consensus that maybe Finn Smith didn't come out of the Lions tour having had the best possible tour that maybe we expected, and he kind of half admitted that, I think, when he was discussing his new Northampton contract last week as well, and I wonder whether that's maybe knocked a bit of the steam out of the kind of momentum behind him to be England's long-term number 10, but I don't necessarily think it should do. I feel like the beautiful position that England are in is having Finn Smith sort of learning and developing while then having Ford on hand as a closer, essentially, like in baseball, where you just have, got a dab hand on the bench who can literally come in and help you close out a win, or if things are a complete disaster, maybe kind of steady the ship while you figure something out. That feels like a better situation. And then that also feels incredibly harsh on Marcus Smith, because Marcus Smith, if he's going to keep playing like he did yesterday while being the Marcus Smith that we know, is going to be really hard to ignore. It's this fascinating debate, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think that's an interesting point you make about Finn Smith's Lions tour. I was down in Australia or got down for the tests and obviously barely saw him. He didn't feature in the tests, which at the end of the Six Nations you'd have said felt unlikely with how much of a coming force he was. I think there's probably a few factors at play there. One is that he is a fly half only. Basically, he's played a little bit of 12, but that cuts down your opportunities to make your way into a squad if you're only really covering one position. The other thing to say is, and some of the Northampton players have reflected on this from last season, it is a big step up sort of managing a full international itinerary alongside being a key player for your club, and then adding on a Lions tour at the end. That would have been I think that would have been, Finn Smith's first proper touring experience, I guess. And that would have been quite a lot to handle. So he will no doubt be a better player on the back of it, from working with Johnny Sexton as a coach on that tour, from working with Finn Russell, from working with Marcus Smith, Owen Farrell. I think he will have learned a lot, and it will also probably have lit another fire in him to, I think he said this when he resigned. He said he really wants to seize that England fly half shirt and really lead them into the next World Cup. So he'll have the bit between his teeth, and he will not be shying away from the competition. They're all three very competitive, but very friendly, very helpful, very good blokes, I guess, who will all be pushing on together. But no doubt they'll all want to wear 10 this autumn.
I just love like a time machine just to take me to December 1st to know how it's played out in terms of who did get the 4 starts and how England kind of manage it. But yeah, I hope. The other thing that we should say about Finn Smith is there is the convenience of the Alex Mitchell-Finn Smith tandem, that they are literally in each other's pockets for club duty, for test duty. It's a partnership that's only getting stronger. as you've suggested, Finn Smith is making Alex Mitchell younger, just purely because he's alongside him so often. It just makes Alex Mitchell seem like he's a younger player than he actually is. So, yeah. Oh, listen, we're going to be talking about it so much going into the opening game of the autumn that I'm really intrigued how it's going to play out. Listen, Harry, a little pause, and then we're going to get onto one final topic, which I will not spoil yet, and then we'll wrap up. Right, Harry, I wanted to just touch on a story by our colleague Gerard Meager in the Guardian yesterday, which is an exclusive about how the RFU are basically trying to convince residents that having more events at Allianz Stadium, which is the necessary thing to happen really in the long run, because they need to start kind of creating more funds to get more kind of revenue into the game by having more concerts. And so they're trying to, there's like this cat and mouse game at the moment, isn't there, with the council, where they're trying to say, look, this is how we would do it. This is how it'll be okay for residents. And obviously, if you are a resident in the Allianz Stadium area over the years, you have probably seen some things, for want of a better way of putting it, on a match day. You've probably been aware of a few shenanigans and things taking place. So the RFU's latest proposal, which Gerard has written about, is that they plan to use anti-pee paint, which, in Gerard's words, would leave public offenders covered in their own urine. And the RFU believe that this will ease residents' fears about plans for the increased number of music concerts at Allianz Stadium moving forward. I mean, this is a great story by Gerard, because it certainly wasn't something that I saw on the radar at all. What do you make of it?
Yeah, cracking story from Gerard, and one of those that, you know, the headline alone brings you in, I guess, which is always the aim. It's a really strange situation that the RFU have found themselves in, where they have this massive arena that they are capable of selling out more and more times a year. You look at what might happen with the Red Roses over the next couple of years, and whether they might be selling out more regularly as well. But as an events venue, it's currently massively underutilized by comparison to other big stadia in London. It just doesn't get the use that it probably should do. You know, it is more than 80,000 people capacity, so it is a mega arena that should be hosting the world's biggest artists, I guess. But because of the council's restrictions on use, they just can't use it at the moment. So I imagine the RFU will be trying to move heaven and earth to get their license expanded. The latest soundings suggest that is unlikely, but whether it's anti-pee paint or I don't know, investing in the infrastructure, they've talked about doing things at Hounslow Station, at Whitton Station, to ease some of the pressure on Twickenham, which anyone who's had the misfortune of travelling back after an England men's or England women's match day now will know it's a total mess in and around the station. So I can see some more off the wall ideas coming up as they try and basically convince Richmond Council to expand their license and start hosting more events. But I think it is important, though, to separate the two as well. A lot of the incidents that will have been reported by residents are rugby fans, whereas perhaps the expansion to the license would see a different clientele, more concert goers. I probably don't attend enough major concerts to be able to say how they behave, but it will probably be a slightly different behaviour. Maybe not better or worse, but just different. But great story and one that will be very interesting to follow over the next year or so as they look to expand Twickenham as well.
Yeah, look, there's many more council meetings ahead of us, I think, in this process. But you're right. If you want to pay for an overhaul of the stadium, which is going to cost up to 660 million or in that area, then more events need to happen, and they need to find a better way to fund it. But I can remember having similar discussions with people back before the 2015 Rugby World Cup, when there was chat about the rebuild of Twickenham Station and how that was going to help kind of ease the process on match day. And is it a better process? I wouldn't necessarily say that there's been kind of massive improvements there from how it was before, unless I've just kind of scrubbed those match day experiences from my memory. I just found it fascinating, and like you say, anti-pee paint headline like that is always going to reel me in. Oh, listen. Harry, what a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very, very much for stopping by. I know it won't be the last time. And listen, I'm sure we will catch up very soon at Pennyhill Park as we start building into another busy autumn for Steve Borthwick and his side.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, it's been a pleasure coming on. And see you soon for for some Steve Borthwick quotes, which I know will be exciting us through the autumn.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Listen, cheers, Harry. I'll be back with Charlie for Friday's episode. But until then, everybody, thank you very much.